"You're too old to be a lover," my husband said, laughing as he tossed my new lingerie back into the shopping bag. "Just accept that you're getting old, Sarah." Those words hit me like a slap across the face. After 25 years of marriage, after sacrificing my dreams to raise our children, after putting his needs before mine countless times, this was how he saw me, a woman past her expiration date. But what my husband didn't know was that menopause wasn't making me weaker. It was making me dangerous. The hormonal changes weren't just affecting my body, they were awakening something fierce inside me that had been dormant for decades. Something that would soon turn his cruel words into the biggest mistake of his life. At 52, I was about to discover that being too old was actually my greatest superpower. And when a 28-year-old dance instructor started looking at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the room, my husband would finally understand what he had thrown away. This is the story of how menopause gave me back my life, how I reclaimed the woman I used to be, and how sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming the person you were always meant to be. Because while my husband thought I was fading away, I was actually just getting started. My name is Sarah, and until recently I thought my story was already written. Married at 27 to David, a successful accountant who seemed like the perfect husband material. We had what everyone called a good marriage, stable, predictable, safe. We raised 2 beautiful children, Emma and Jake, who are now 23 and 21, both living their own lives in different cities. For 25 years, I molded myself into the perfect wife. I gave up my dance career. Yes, I was actually a professional dancer once, to support David's ambitions and raise our family. I convinced myself it was temporary, that I'd return to dance someday. That someday never came. Instead, I became the woman who packed lunches, attended PTA meetings, organized family gatherings, and made sure everyone else's dreams came true, while mine collected dust in the closet. Our house in suburban Connecticut became my entire world. A beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a white picket fence. The American dream, right? But somewhere between soccer practices and dinner parties, I lost myself completely. I stopped looking in mirrors unless necessary. I bought clothes for comfort, not beauty. I accepted that my role was to be the supporting character in everyone else's story. David and I fell into a routine that felt more like roommates than lovers. We'd have dinner, watch TV, go to bed, rinse and repeat. Physical intimacy became scheduled, mechanical, something to check off a list rather than an expression of passion. When I tried to initiate romance, he'd often be too tired, too stressed, or simply uninterested. I began to believe that this was just what happened to marriages after a certain point. The children were my world, my purpose, my identity. When Emma left for college, I felt a piece of my soul go with her. When Jake followed 2 years later, the empty nest syndrome hit me like a freight train. Suddenly I was face to face with a question I'd been avoiding for decades. Who was I when I wasn't being someone's mother or wife? That's when the changes started. At 51, menopause arrived with a vengeance. Hot flashes, mood swings, sleepless nights, all the things they warn you about. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes, buried beneath all that chaos, something powerful awakens. I started feeling restless, like I was suffocating in my own life. I'd catch glimpses of the woman I used to be in old photos, confident, radiant, alive, and wonder where she went. David noticed my struggles, but dismissed them as women's problems. He'd make jokes about my hot flashes, roll his eyes when I couldn't sleep, and suggest I just take something for it when I tried to talk about how I was feeling. His solution to everything was to medicate it away or ignore it until it passed. I started going to therapy, something David thought was unnecessary drama. Dr. Martinez helped me realize that I'd spent so many years being what others needed me to be that I'd forgotten who I actually was. She encouraged me to reconnect with things that brought me joy, to rediscover my passions. That's when I remembered dance, the way it felt to move my body with purpose, to express emotions through movement, to feel powerful and graceful and alive. I started watching dance videos online, stretching in the living room when David wasn't home, remembering the woman who once commanded stages, and felt beautiful in her own skin. Our marriage had become a business partnership at best. We discussed schedules, finances, and household maintenance, but we never talked about dreams, desires, or the future we wanted to build together. I realized I was lonely in my own home, invisible to the man who was supposed to love me most. But I was about to learn that sometimes the most beautiful transformations happen when you think it's too late to change. But everything started to change when I found that shopping bag hidden in David's closet. It was a Saturday morning in March, and I was putting away his clean laundry when I noticed a Victoria's Secret bag tucked behind his winter coats. My heart stopped. Inside was the most beautiful lingerie set I'd ever seen. Black lace, delicate and expensive, clearly chosen with care. For a moment I felt a flutter of excitement. Maybe David was planning a romantic surprise. Maybe he was trying to rekindle what we'd lost. I decided to surprise him instead. That evening, after a nice dinner and a bottle of wine, I excused myself and slipped into the lingerie. I felt nervous but excited, like a teenager preparing for her first date. When I emerged from the bathroom, David was scrolling through his phone on the bed. "Surprise," I said softly, striking a pose in the doorway. He looked up, and the expression on his face wasn't desire or appreciation. It was embarrassment. Awkward, uncomfortable embarrassment, like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "Sarah, what are you doing?" he asked, not even bothering to put his phone down. "I found the lingerie," I said, my confidence already starting to crumble. "I thought maybe we could—" "That's not for you," he interrupted, his voice sharp. "I bought that for—" "Never mind, just take it off." The words hit me like ice water. "What do you mean it's not for me? Who else would it be for?" David ran his hands through his hair, clearly frustrated. "Look, Sarah, you're 52 years old. You're too old to be playing dress-up like this. It's embarrassing. For both of us." I stood there in that beautiful lingerie, feeling more naked and exposed than I ever had in my life. "Too old? I'm your wife, David. I'm the same woman you married." "No, you're not," he said, finally looking at me directly. "You're a mother, a grandmother-to-be someday. This whole sexy wife thing, it doesn't suit you anymore. You need to accept that you're getting old and act accordingly." The lingerie suddenly felt like a costume, like I was a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. I retreated to the bathroom, peeled off the lace, and put on my cotton pajamas. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, something shifted inside me. The hurt was there, yes, but underneath it was something else. Anger. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about that night. David never explained who the lingerie was actually for, and I was too humiliated to ask. But I started paying attention to things I'd previously ignored. The way he dressed more carefully for work lately, the new cologne, the late nights at the office that seemed to happen more frequently. I also started noticing how he looked at other women. At the grocery store, at restaurants, at our friends' parties. His eyes would follow younger women with an appreciation he no longer showed me. When our neighbor's 28-year-old daughter came to visit, I watched him light up in a way that made my stomach turn. But the real wake-up call came during our friend Janet's birthday party. I was in the kitchen helping with drinks when I overheard David talking to his buddy Mike on the patio. "Marriage after 50 is basically a business arrangement," David was saying. "Sarah's a great mother and keeps the house running, but let's be honest, the romance part is over. Women that age they lose it, you know? The spark, the sex appeal. It's biology." Mike laughed. "So what do? Just accept a sexless marriage?" "You adapt," David replied. "You find other ways to feel alive." I stood frozen in that kitchen, holding a pitcher of margaritas as my 25-year marriage crumbled around me. This wasn't just about one cruel comment or one rejected advance. This was about how my husband fundamentally saw me as a woman whose value had expired, whose desirability had an expiration date that had already passed. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling while David slept peacefully beside me. Something was crystallizing inside me, something that felt dangerous and powerful and completely unstoppable. If David thought I was too old to be a lover, too old to be desired, too old to be anything more than a housekeeper and mother, then he was about to learn just how wrong he could be. The woman he'd dismissed was about to rise from the ashes of his cruelty, and she was going to be magnificent. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but when it began, it was unstoppable. I started with small acts of rebellion. Instead of buying my usual practical clothes, I invested in pieces that made me feel beautiful. Flowing dresses, well-fitted jeans, tops that actually flattered my figure. When David commented that I was spending too much on clothes, I simply smiled and said I was worth it. Then I did something I hadn't done in 25 years. I signed up for dance classes. The studio was downtown, a beautiful space with floor-to-ceiling mirrors and polished hardwood floors. When I walked in for my first adult beginners class, my hands were shaking. I was easily the oldest person there, surrounded by women in their 20s and 30s who moved with the confidence I'd lost decades ago. But then the music started and something magical happened. My body remembered. Every stretch, every movement, every graceful extension felt like coming home. I was rusty, yes, but underneath the years of neglect, the dancer was still there. "You have beautiful lines," said a voice behind me after class. I turned to see the instructor, a man with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Have you danced before?" "A lifetime ago," I replied, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm Marcus," he said, extending his hand, "and I think you should consider our intermediate class. You have natural grace." Marcus was 28, with the lean build of a professional dancer and an enthusiasm for movement that was infectious. Over the next few weeks, he became my teacher, my encourager, and slowly, my friend. He never made me feel old or out of place. Instead, he saw the dancer in me that I'd forgotten existed. At home, David barely noticed my new schedule. When I mentioned I was taking dance classes, he grunted something about midlife crisis hobbies and went back to his phone. He didn't ask about my progress, didn't show interest in my newfound passion, didn't even notice that I was becoming more confident, more radiant, more alive. But others noticed. At the grocery store, men started making eye contact, smiling, even striking up conversations. At the coffee shop near the dance studio, the young barista began remembering my order and asking about my day. I caught my reflection in windows and was surprised to see a woman who looked vibrant, purposeful, attractive. The real shift happened during a dinner party at our friend's house. I wore a new dress. Nothing inappropriate, just something that fit well and made me feel confident. Throughout the evening, I noticed men gravitating towards me in conversations, laughing at my jokes, asking about my dance classes with genuine interest. David noticed too, and he didn't like it. "You're embarrassing yourself," he hissed in my ear during a moment when we were alone, acting like some desperate housewife trying to recapture her youth. "I'm just being myself," I replied calmly. "This isn't yourself. This is some fantasy version of who you think you used to be. You're 52, Sarah. Act like it." But I was acting like it. I was acting like a 52-year-old woman who had finally remembered her worth. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. I'd had a particularly good class. Marcus had been teaching us a challenging routine, and I'd nailed it. I felt powerful, graceful, alive. I came home glowing with accomplishment, eager to share my excitement. David was in the kitchen and I practically danced through the door. "You should see what I learned today," I said, demonstrating a turn sequence. "Marcus says I have the potential to perform in the studio showcase next month." David looked up from his laptop with an expression of pure disgust. "Sarah, stop. Just stop. This is pathetic. You're a middle-aged woman playing pretend. Do you know how ridiculous you look right now?" I stopped mid-turn, my arms still raised, my heart still racing from the joy of movement. "Marcus is probably just being nice because he feels sorry for you," David continued, his voice cruel and deliberate. "A 28-year-old man has no genuine interest in a woman your age. You're deluding yourself if you think otherwise." In that moment, standing in my own kitchen with my arms slowly falling to my sides, I realized that David wasn't just dismissing my dancing. He was trying to kill the part of me that was coming back to life. And that's when I decided he had to go. The moment of truth came 3 weeks later, on the night of the studio showcase. I had been rehearsing for weeks, working with Marcus on a contemporary piece that told the story of a woman rediscovering herself. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture meaningful. I felt more prepared for this performance than I had for anything in decades. David had refused to come, of course. "I'm not watching you make a fool of yourself in public," he'd said. So I went alone, my heart pounding with nerves and excitement. The performance was magical. Under the stage lights, wearing a flowing dress that moved like water, I felt like I was 25 again, but better, because now I understood what it meant to dance with purpose, with story, with hard-earned wisdom. The audience was captivated, and when I finished, the applause was thunderous. Marcus met me backstage, his eyes shining with pride. "Sarah, that was incredible. You were absolutely luminous out there." And then he did something that changed everything. He kissed me. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated. It was pure emotion, pure appreciation for what we'd created together. And for the first time in years, I felt desired, valued, seen as a woman worth wanting. I drove home in a daze, my trophy from the showcase sitting on the passenger seat, my lips still tingling from that unexpected kiss. I felt alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. David was waiting in the living room when I walked in, and his face was thunderous. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "It's past midnight." "At the showcase," I said, holding up my trophy. "I won first place in the adult division." He barely glanced at it. "Sarah, we need to talk. This whole dance thing has gone too far. You're neglecting your responsibilities, spending money we don't have, and frankly, you're embarrassing our family." I set the trophy down carefully on the coffee table. "What responsibilities am I neglecting, David? The children are grown. The house is clean. Dinner is made every night. You're my wife," he said, his voice rising. "You're supposed to act like it, not run around town playing teenager with some boy young enough to be your son. Marcus is a professional dance instructor and a good friend." "Friend?" David laughed bitterly. "Sarah, wake up. He's 28 years old. He's not your friend. He's probably laughing about you with his real friends. The desperate older woman who thinks she's still got it." That's when I decided to tell him the truth. "Actually, David," I said, my voice steady and calm, "Marcus kissed me tonight, after my performance, because he thinks I'm beautiful, talented, and worth celebrating." The color drained from David's face. "What?" "You heard me. A 28-year-old man, a gorgeous, talented, kind 28-year-old man, kissed me because he finds me attractive, because he sees value in me that you stopped seeing years ago." David stood up, his hands clenched into fists. "You're lying. You're making this up to hurt me." "I'm not lying. And you know what the best part is? He's not the only one. Men notice me now, David. They see me as a woman worth their attention, worth their time, worth their desire, because I finally see myself that way too." "This is insane," David sputtered. "You're having some kind of breakdown. You need help." I picked up my trophy, feeling its weight in my hands. "You know what I need, David? I need a husband who sees me as more than a housekeeper. I need a partner who celebrates my achievements instead of trying to diminish them. I need a man who thinks I'm beautiful at 52, not someone who tells me I'm too old to be desired." "Sarah, you're being ridiculous. I'm done being ridiculous," I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. "I'm done being too old, too embarrassing, too much. I'm 52 years old, and I'm just getting started." David stared at me, his mouth open in shock. "You want to know what menopause brought me, David? It brought me clarity. It brought me courage. It brought me the understanding that I don't need your permission to be magnificent." I headed toward the stairs, then turned back one last time. "Oh, and David, that lingerie you bought, I know it wasn't for me. And honestly, I don't care anymore, because I finally understand that the problem was never that I was too old to be a lover. The problem was that you were too small to deserve one." The aftermath was swift and decisive, but not in the way I expected. David didn't explode with anger or storm out of the house. Instead, he crumpled. For the first time in our 25-year marriage, I watched my husband break down completely. He sat on our couch, his head in his hands, and began to sob. "Sarah, please," he whispered. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." But his apology felt hollow, desperate. The panic of a man who suddenly realized he was losing something valuable, not the genuine remorse of someone who understood the depth of his cruelty. Over the next few days, David tried everything. He bought flowers, made dinner reservations, even suggested we take a trip to Paris, something I'd been asking for years. But it all felt like damage control, not genuine change. The real revelation came a week later when his phone rang during dinner. He stepped outside to take the call, and when he came back, his face was ashen. "Who was that?" I asked. He sat down heavily, avoiding my eyes. "That was Jennifer from my office. She's pregnant." The words hung in the air between us like a bomb waiting to explode. Jennifer, the 26-year-old marketing coordinator with the bright smile and ambitious eyes. The one David had mentioned a few too many times over the past year. "The lingerie," I said quietly, and it wasn't a question. David nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Sarah, it meant nothing. It was just, I felt old, invisible. She made me feel young again. But it's over now, I swear it's over." I felt strangely calm, like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. "How long?" 8 months, he whispered. 8 months. While I was struggling with menopause, feeling invisible and unwanted, my husband was finding validation in the arms of a woman young enough to be our daughter. While he was telling me I was too old to be a lover, he was proving that he was young enough to be a fool. "She wants me to leave you," he continued. "She wants us to be together, to raise the baby together. But Sarah, I don't want that. I want us. I want our marriage." I looked at this man I'd spent half my life with, this man who had systematically destroyed my self-worth while building up another woman, and I felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak, no desire for revenge, just a profound sense of clarity. "David," I said gently, "you don't want our marriage. You want your safety net. You want the woman who'll take care of you when Jennifer realizes that a 55-year-old man with a pregnant girlfriend isn't as exciting as she thought." "That's not true." "It is true. And you know what? I'm grateful." He looked up, confused. "Grateful?" "Grateful that you showed me who you really are. Grateful that you pushed me to rediscover who I really am. Because while you were busy proving, you were still young enough to impress a 26-year-old. I was proving that I'm magnificent at 52. I stood up from the table, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I'm filing for divorce, David. Not because I'm angry, though I was, but because I finally understand that I deserve better. Sarah, please. We can work through this. Couples therapy, counseling, whatever you want." "What I want," I said, "is a life where I'm not constantly made to feel like I'm too much or not enough. What I want is a partner who sees my strengths as beautiful, not threatening. What I want is someone who celebrates my renaissance instead of trying to bury it." The next morning I called Marcus, not because I was ready for a relationship, I wasn't, but because I needed to thank him for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. "Marcus, it's Sarah. I wanted you to know that I'm getting divorced." There was a pause. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I'm free. And I wanted to thank you for helping me remember who I am." "Sarah, you did that yourself. I just provided the music." We talked for an hour about dance, about dreams, about the courage it takes to start over. He didn't try to convince me to date him, didn't push for more than I was ready to give. He simply celebrated my strength and promised that whenever I was ready to dance again, he'd be there. That afternoon I went to see a lawyer. Then I went to a realtor. Then I went to the dance studio and signed up for advanced classes. David moved out 2 weeks later, taking his guilt and his promises and his desperate attempts at reconciliation with him. Jennifer called me once, crying, asking if I hated her. I told her the truth, that I felt sorry for her because she was about to learn what it felt like to love a man who would always be looking for the next woman to make him feel young. As I watched David's car disappear down our street for the last time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, excitement for my future. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my new apartment, a bright, airy space downtown, walking distance from the dance studio that became my sanctuary. The walls are covered with photos from performances, travel adventures, and moments of pure joy that I never thought I'd experience again. The divorce was finalized last month. David married Jennifer 3 weeks later in a small ceremony that, according to mutual friends, felt more like a business transaction than a celebration of love. Their baby was born healthy, and I genuinely wish them well. I've learned that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But this story isn't really about David or Jennifer or even about divorce. It's about the woman I became when I stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. Marcus and I did eventually start dating, though not in the way people might expect. Our relationship grew slowly, built on mutual respect, shared passions, and the understanding that love isn't about age. It's about seeing and celebrating each other's authentic selves. He challenges me intellectually, supports my dreams, and yes, he still thinks I'm beautiful. But more importantly, I think I'm beautiful. The dance studio has become my second home. I'm now teaching classes for women over 40, helping other women rediscover their bodies, their confidence, their right to take up space. Every week, I see women walk through those doors, carrying the same shame I once carried. The belief that they're too old, too out of shape, too late to start something new. And every week, I watch them transform. Last month, a 67-year-old grandmother named Helen joined my class. She'd been told by her adult children that dance was inappropriate for someone her age. By her third class, she was moving with such grace and joy that the entire room stopped to watch. When she performed her first solo piece last week, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Age is just a number, Helen told me afterward. But shame? Shame is a choice. She's right. For too many years, I chose shame. I chose to believe that my value decreased with each birthday, that my desirability had an expiration date, that my dreams were less important than everyone else's comfort. Menopause didn't make me old. It made me honest. It stripped away the people-pleasing, the self-doubt, the need for external validation. It gave me the courage to look in the mirror and like what I saw, not because I looked 25, but because I looked like a woman who had lived, learned, and refused to disappear. I've learned that there's something incredibly powerful about a woman who stops caring what other people think. We become dangerous in the best possible way. Dangerous to systems that profit from our insecurity. Dangerous to people who need us small to feel big. Dangerous to the lie that our best years are behind us. My children were initially confused by my transformation. Emma worried I was having a midlife crisis, while Jake was embarrassed by his suddenly cool mom. But as they've watched me build a life that brings me joy, they've both admitted that they're proud of who I've become. Emma recently told me that watching my journey has inspired her to pursue her own dreams more fearlessly. I'm not the same woman who stood in that bathroom 6 months ago, humiliated in lingerie that wasn't meant for me. I'm not the woman who accepted crumbs of affection and called it love. I'm not the woman who believed that her story was already written. I'm 52 years old, and I'm just getting started. To every woman reading this who has been told she's too old, too much, too late, I want you to know that they're wrong. Your value doesn't decrease with age. It compounds. Your dreams don't have expiration dates. Your body is not an apology. If you're in a relationship where you're made to feel invisible, where your growth is seen as a threat, where your renaissance is met with resistance, please know that you deserve better. You deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated. You deserve to be desired, not endured. And if you're facing menopause or already through it and wondering what comes next, let me tell you, everything comes next. The best chapters of your story might still be unwritten. I'd love to hear from other women who have found their power later in life. Have you had a moment where you stopped apologizing for who you are? Have you discovered new passions, new loves, new versions of yourself? Share your stories in the comments, because every time we tell our truths, we give another woman permission to tell hers. Remember, you're not too old to be magnificent. You're exactly the right age to be everything you were meant to be. Dance like nobody's watching. Live like your story is just beginning. Because it is.